Hello, everybody. Today I'm going to talk to my best friend Fedor. I normally introduce him as this super smart astrophysicist who speaks fluently 4 languages and looks like a Thor. He also lived in many different countries, traveled all around the world, and we have been on many different adventures together. And if it sounds a little bit like I'm over-idealizing Fedor, you're completely right. And so in this episode, we're going to debunk the myth of a superhuman Fedor. We're also going to talk about the difficulty of moving around, weddings, babies, physics, and further experience with the death of my girlfriend Liz. So this episode is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be more of a raw conversation between 2 good friends rather than a big story. But you will hear some stories, for example, like why Fedor only has 1 weird food in the fridge at the time and how he almost became a head designer. And before we jump into it, I would like to put here a small disclaimer. In this episode, we're going to talk about suicide and mental health. So just be aware of that. You're listening to Broken Compass Show. Raw conversation about how people navigate their life when they feel lost with all the good, bad, and bittersweet things that comes with it. Because life is not always rainbows and sunshine, is it? Please, 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 if you enjoy the show, don't forget to give it a rating and share it with somebody who might need to hear it as well. Because the more people... Hey, Fedor, welcome on the Broken Compass. It's a pleasure to have you here. How are you, man?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm doing great. I'm actually quite excited about this. It's my first podcast, so it's a new experience. It will be definitely interesting. And I mean, ultimately, I'm just glad to see your face and hang out with you a bit more now that you're on the other side of the globe.
Yeah, because today I'm in Chile, in Valparaíso, Viña de Mar, which is next to it, and you are in...
I'm in Munich right now, which is where I live since April. So, but I'm not recording from home. I'm recording from my work's office, as it conveniently is only 5 minutes away by foot from where I live. So
Nice.
I could say this is like my extended office room from home.
We're definitely gonna talk about that work as well.
Oh, I see. So it is a work day then.
We can't talk about Fedor and not talk about physics. That would be impossible, I think. But it became kind of a tradition that when I know people, I always ask them like how we met or what is the first memory that you remember about two of us.
Right. So let me try to gather my memories. The year was, and this is already tough. I'm gonna say 2010. What do you think?
That's correct. You get a plus point.
Oh, good. 5 points for Gryffindor. Great. So yeah, as far as I remember, it went this way. At the time, I was studying in Tübingen, which is a German city, like a university town. And a common friend of ours, Andre Val, Andy, he studied in Nottingham, but he was doing an exchange, sort of Erasmus year in Constance. And so, which is really not that far away. It's like a 2 or 3 hour train ride, I would say, roughly. And so yes, he was there, and I wanted to visit him, and then I did, and and he was telling me that he's hanging out with some cool Czech guy, and that's how we met. I think, right? We went.
We should also say that you are from Slovakia, and Andy is also from Slovakia, and basically in the group of friends, I'm the only Czech person, which gonna come around, I think, one point.
That is somehow hilarious, right? Because you're Czech, but all of your friendship group, like at least this part, is Slovak, and you're the odd one out. Well, there's another Czech person now, right? There's Jiří.
Yeah.
But for a long time, you were the only one. Yeah.
I remember the first time I remember meeting you, like first really memory that's stamped in my brain is when we went to a Berries, which is a nightclub in Constance, which is very popular for students because it has a student night on Monday when you get everything for half price if you came before 11. You get a free entry. Of course, we went there when you visited.
Of course.
So I feel like it must have been Monday when we went there, or Saturday or something like that. And we always had this saying, like, nothing ever good happens because we were buying these Desperados, and they had these huge Desperados, like 0.7 liters desperados you will be drinking before, and then you were getting there. And we said nothing ever good happens after 3 desperados. And I remember we were buying one on the bar, just you and me, and it was somewhere else. And I had like this this heartbreaking moment, and I was like looking at you, and I was like, if you don't like me, it's fine. It's okay. I'm this great guy. You don't have to pretend anything. Do you remember it?
Yeah, so I remember I remember the story that you thought I really don't like you, and I have never really figured out why. Like, what did I do to offend? I mean, maybe it was just my character, but
yeah, I don't know, man. I don't remember. Not really. But I think that kind of that moment of vulnerability was that like what kind of bonded, at least from my side, me to you, which is that's why I remember it.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, the way the night went on, I think we've both proven to ourselves the contrary of me not liking you. But yeah, I remember that's how we started, and you told me, and I was like, "What the hell? Where is this coming from?" I don't know. Maybe it's. I want to say in hindsight that something got lost in translation between Slovak and Czech, and that's why you didn't like me.
Yeah. Or maybe my insecurities, one of the others. Yeah. I was thinking about having you on a podcast, and I realized something that's a little bit maybe a fucked up. But every time I talk to other people about you, I always tell you like, hey, this is the guy. He speaks many languages. He's like physically a Greek god playing rugby. He has a Ph.D. He like studied all these things. And I think that without wanting it, that I really like idealized your life. I was always like, man, like living like a Fedor, that would be great life.
I was about to say, I think that's a bit of an over-idealized sort of image of me, and by over I mean over-idealized.
And we never talked about it, so this is a great opportunity. And I only remember there's only one time in my life, which is stamped, and you heard this story many times. We're gonna get to it as well, which when I was like, oh, this guy didn't really figure out all of it yet, and he also have problems. And that was on this New Year's Eve when we're celebrating in somewhere cottage outside of Bratislava in some small village in Slovakia. We were having some drinks. At one point, we were sitting like I think in some armchairs next to each other. We're drinking something, and we were talking. And then you said, "Are you happy?" And I was like, we were like 22, 23, something like that. And I was like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, what is this question? Like, is there another answer than yes? And I was like baffled by it. I think I was even more baffled that you said that question. And I was like, what the fuck? And then you look at me like, no, I'm not. And I was like, huh? I don't remember the rest of the conversation, by the way, which is funny, but it really stuck with me.
I always so you told me this story before, and I always wonder what the context of that was, or like, how did the conversation continue? Did I go, I'm not happy, therefore ABC, or did I say I'm not happy because of something? I mean, yeah, I suppose it's too far away now to really recall what happened and why. But yeah, I think it's. I mean, to me, it always seemed like everyone is sometimes happy, sometimes not, right? If you're always happy, I like it doesn't even work, because then what does happy mean, right? You need to benchmark it against something else. What's a good feeling if you don't know a bad feeling? Then you can't really identify it. I mean, here's the scientist speaking, but I guess you'll have more of that on this podcast. I apologize in advance.
No, that's funny. It's funny. Although we like a lot of the people that we talked before, right? We talk about emotions are not really bad or good; they are just emotions. So yeah, maybe they are like what would say more of emotions, like right neutron and the plus and minus is like not bad and good, right? It's just like opposite,
they're just
right. Can we do it this way in physics? Yes,
we can. Yes, yeah. The other thing that I find quite interesting about this story is that before you told me, and I think you told me like 10 years later, like I didn't remember any of this, and it seems to be a theme with me that like I get every now and then I get a person who just digs up some quote that I said, not thinking anything, probably because that's how I feel most of the time, and I just say some random sentence which I think makes sense at the time, and then it somehow sticks with the other person, and they like, sometimes really come back to it, and put a whole like meaning around this sentence, and I don't even know about it. And then they come to me and they're like, "Oh yeah, you said this," and I'm like, "Oh really? Did I? What? When?" So this has happened. I know at least I think 4 people where this I had this sort of situation already. It's kind of hilarious. I don't understand.
Yeah, I think I'm writing this gratitude letter. You got one as well, and I realized how often like some small things that people did that they maybe not even realized that had tremendous meaning for me, but we just don't talk about it, especially in like our countries like Czech Republic, Slovakia, like the Middle Europe, maybe, or even this is not like things that we would like mention, like why, it's unnecessary, right? But they know maybe, or I don't know, or we just don't talk about. Maybe we just don't talk about it. I don't know.
Yeah, I guess it's yeah. I wonder why people don't talk about it. I mean, if something is important to you, and especially if it's a positive thing, it shouldn't be that hard to sort of mention it to, I don't know, your friends if they've influenced you in a good way. This is why actually I really enjoyed your so the sort of thank you letter that you wrote, which came out of the blue, and at first I wasn't sure I'm supposed to open it or not, and how many viruses I'm gonna get if I do. Like, but then I was like, oh, it's probably okay. So I clicked on it and I read it, and it was amazing. And I actually like that's such a cool idea because it made my day. It probably also on your side, maybe I don't know. It probably contributed to filtering out things that are important from the ones that are not important, or like just sort of getting a grasp of, I don't know, the relationship that the two of us like have, right, as friends.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's nice. It's nice. It's hard to write it, to be honest, because there's a lot of emotions, a lot of vulnerability. Um, but it's good in the end. It
yeah,
gives you a different perception of life. So
absolutely.
I'm glad I did, and I'm glad it made your day. It makes me happy.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't just okay. Of course, there was a lot of emotion. It was heartfelt, but you also made it funny, which made it a lot more like I wouldn't say palatable is not the right word. It's just easy to read, right? It's enjoyable to read
Mm.
because there are jokes, and then you know, I think humor in combination with sort of serious emotions actually works really well quite often, and that's maybe the way of packaging sort of more serious information.
Mm. Okay, but
Yeah,
let's get back to that unhappy conversation. So you said you don't remember what is it was like, what that.
absolutely not. But I can imagine. So if I was 20 something, I don't know. I think it probably was just some phase of me being a bit lost in, like, let's say my studies at the time, I suppose, or work. I haven't had started my PhD at that time, so it must have been my studies. So probably I was just unsure whether what I'm doing makes sense and what the ultimate goal of it is, or whether I'm studying the right thing. All of these decisions, right? You at some point you sort of have to. You get to all of these forks in the road, and you have to go left or right, and then it's always a question of opportunity cost, and you're wondering what was on the other side and what you could have done. And then I think, especially when you're younger, well, maybe not even when you're younger, also when you're older, you compare yourself to everyone else, to your peers, like your friends, but also just people that you know, right? And I think the problem with that comparison, especially until you understand this fact, is that you're always comparing yourself as an individual against sort of the sum of everyone you know. Right, so it's never a fair comparison. You don't just go, oh, okay, this guy, he's done that, but on the other hand, maybe he hasn't done this one thing that I have done, or like cannot do, or like I don't know. There is some pros and cons, but what you take is sort of the best of everyone, and that's the standard that you put yourself against, and you can only fail against that, right? I mean, that's a very like sort of biased comparison against you. At least that's how it worked for me, and I think I
and I think the other thing that you mentioned right now is you take the best of them, right? But you never see all the other things.
Yes, true.
Are maybe not happy with themselves and like that's the overly idealized view of you, right? That I kind of have. I don't know. Maybe we will see after today.
Well, we can work on that for sure.
Okay, so I think we need to touch upon this a little bit deeper. So every time I meet somebody, I always tell them, you study some astrophysics, because I have no idea what you study. Now I know it has something to do with quantum computing, which I kind of know what it means, but not really. So how did you get to the physics? Like, where did it start? I know that your dad is physicist. He won some prize, right? A few years ago or something.
Yeah, he did.
So
yes. So my dad would be closer to an astrophysicist than I am, or at least a high energy physicist. So he's studying these elusive particles that are called neutrinos, which are really hard to detect, but somehow they are super important towards, answering the very basic questions of how does our universe work. And I mean, he's onto that. And yeah, he recently won a prize in Slovakia for his scientific contribution. So well, those are some shoes to fill, but cleverly enough, I've decided to stray from astrophysics or anything too related to his work, to not be compared or to not be in the same field as him. I think it's better to build your own thing and have your own path. But yeah, so coming back to the question, how did it start? I think one of the things about why I ended up in physics is that I was always sort of right at doing physics or math at school. Actually, if you look at what a physicist does at like university or when you're really working, I would say it's closer to math at school than to physics at school, because the physics at school is kind of very applied. It just sort of tells you the consequences of things, but doesn't really tell you how to sort of find out what's going on by yourself. But yeah, I think the reason, that was, I suppose, a necessary it was important that I would be able to do it. So what's the word? A necessary
prerequisite.
Prerequisite. Yeah, that's the word. Sorry. But I think why I got to it ultimately is that as a kid, I would ask, everyone asks their dad what they're doing, right? And then I would ask my dad, and he'll be like, "Oh yeah, I'm doing, I'm a physicist," and I'd be, I don't know how old I would be, like 4 or 5. This is where these things start, right? I suppose, I don't really remember, to be honest. But I remember asking him about these things, and then very quickly I would get to the limits of being able to understand what he's talking about, right? I mean, he would try, but it's just beyond like anything that you can, perceive as a small kid. And then as the years would go on, I'd keep asking again and again, right? And every time I would know a bit more, I would understand a bit more, I'd be a bit older, right? And then I'd sort of grasp a tiny bit more of what he's talking about. But I don't know. And then like this whole, I think what happened is this kind of this transferred this interest in physics from him to me. Even though I do a different type of physics now, but like sort of trying to understand like this concept sort of prevailed. And funnily enough, I went to do an undergrad in theoretical physics, and then I basically combined bachelor and master. Then I did a PhD in theoretical physics, and I've been working in it since then, like ever since, and it's been a couple of years since I finished my PhD, and I still sometimes like don't understand what he's talking about. But at least I suppose the playing field evened out a bit, because sometimes he also doesn't understand what I'm talking about. So we're just trying to mutually understand each other. But yeah, so I think that was probably the influence that got me to study physics.
And you touched upon it a little bit, so let's go a little bit deeper there. Is you said like it was nice that now like you start studying, you could understand it, but was there a moment, because your dad has the same name, right, like you, right?
Yeah, he does.
So he has the same name, he does the same thing. Was there any like the moment that you compared to himself, and it was like, how did you said it? You said it
shoes to fill. Yeah.
Yeah, shoes to fill. How did that feel?
Yeah, it's a good question. So first, let me just give a tiny bit of background. So yes, my name's Fedor. My dad's name is Fedor. My grandpa was also called Fedor, and my grandpa as well. So I'm actually the fourth. And I do even like one of the consequences of having the same name as your dad is when I publish, I actually put like a Roman IV behind my name, just so people know that it's like a paper published by myself and not my dad. So that's already like a real life consequence. And by the way, yeah, so I do have a son who's a bit more than a year old, and he's called, well, he has two names. He's called Fedor Levy, so he has a second name in case he doesn't like the tradition. But it was I couldn't I couldn't break it, so I had to name him Fedor as well. And luckily, my wife Fabienne agreed with it. So yeah, he's Fedor the fifth, and let's see how far we get.
Were the grandpas also, and grandpa and grandpas also physicists?
No. So actually, grandpa, I'm not even completely entirely sure what his profession was, but my grandpa was sort of between engineer and chemistry.
Oh, okay. So
very different. Yes, something about my family is weird in the sense that everyone's a physicist. So my grandpa from the other side, from my mother's side, he was a physicist, and my grandma as well. She doesn't practice anymore, but she also has a physics degree. My mom studied physics. My dad is a physics professor. From my grandma, from my dad's side, she was a physics teacher actually, and she was a physics teacher at the school. So I've never met her. She died before I was born, but she was a physics teacher at the school I went to, and somehow all the older teachers remembered her, and apparently she was super strict. So then I would always hear that, like, oh, if your grandma would see this, you'd be in real trouble. But that didn't happen. But yeah. Oh yeah, and my aunt is a physicist, married to a physicist. My cousin Lee, he did a PhD in theoretical physics. So there's something about the gene in our families that we get attracted by this, which is odd, but I guess that's what it is. So coming back to your question about somehow feeling that I have to fill the shoes of my dad. I cannot say why, but I don't think I felt it this way ever. So I was not really comparing myself to him. I think because in a way he's I don't know, like as a father figure it's a bit different, right? You're not like, I don't know, at least in my case, I didn't feel like I'm in competition with my dad or I'm trying to, one up my dad. It always was like, he's just, up there, and like, I'll never reach there. I don't even have to like worry about this problem.
Okay. Interesting.
But I think what I did not want is I did not want people to give me a different kind of treatment for being my dad's son. And that's actually why I avoided sort of that part of physics. So, I mean, for the most part, I've once I participated as like an undergrad in like, and actually that was my only time I did something in experimental physics. There was this, they had this sort of project where we went to a mountain called Gran Sasso in Italy. And it's basically a mountain. There's a highway which goes through it. It's like quite deep underground. And then in the middle of that highway, there's like this tiny road that goes to the side. And then if you go there, you realize that like you come into a massive space, which holds, I don't know how many, like maybe around 5 to 10 like massive physics experiments. And the point is that they need to be under a mountain because they have to be shielded from cosmic rays. So like you get particles which are super high energetic and they can penetrate the earth and then they mess with your experiment and then you don't measure what you're supposed to. And so a lot of the experiments are in that mountain. And that was the one time I did something which was actually related to my dad's work. And I don't know, like, for example, the main professor on that project, like he knew my dad and it just always felt a bit weird, because I wouldn't say I got any preferential treatment. Like, it's not like I got into that project, like everyone got into that project if they wanted to. That wasn't like, I don't think ultimately like I benefited positively or had a negative impact from this, but it just didn't feel right. I just wanted, people to just know me for me and not sort of always be associated or like, oh yeah, he's the son of, the other Fedor Simkovic. Yeah.
Okay. And how did physics change the way you look at the world?
Ooh, now come the tough philosophical questions. Let me think about this for a second. How do I mean, okay, there are probably different aspects of this. Now let me skip the religious one, because I might. So I'm an atheist, and I believe sort of being a scientist in my case contributed to that. But I know that there are actually quite a few scientists who are religious, so it's not like a given that that's the case. So let me skip that for a second. But like I think, well, on a day-to-day basis, probably there is no effect. But in general, you get these moments where, I don't know, you look at something, you're like, how does this work? And I think this curiosity is something that you get from from doing physics. Like, I had this amazing moment at one point with a former housemate of mine, with whom I lived in London. We would like sometimes, go for coffees together and just hang out and chat. And she is more so she studied things which are more related to art, and she's more in the sort of art scene. And so, as you can probably imagine, like the way we perceive the world is slightly different. Which that has no impact on the friendship, but like it's just interesting. And so we had this one moment where we're like walking in the northeast London, like there was like some street, like nice street. There was those like for London standards, anyways, like very nice weather, and there was like a beautiful blue sky. And she goes like, "Isn't it amazing that the sky is so blue? Isn't it like so interesting that it's blue and no other color?" And like, so she didn't even finish the sentence, and I go like, well, actually, the color blue is because you get like light particles scattering and blah blah. And she's like, no, you're ruining it. Like, stop. And so I suppose that wasn't the first time I was, she would ask a like sort of open-ended question, and I would start trying to answer it. But so she already knew what I was up to, and that's why she stopped me. But I think that's maybe a good explanation of how you're perceiving the world slightly differently, maybe if you're more into the sort of sciencey subjects.
Well, what do physicists think about irrationality and emotions?
Okay, okay. There are. Let's separate the two. Irrationality, to me, the way I understand it, is that you make a decision which, if you thought about it enough and you sort of used reason and logic, you would have come to a different conclusion, and that conclusion would be provably better. I think that's my definition of irrationality. So, and you see where I'm heading with this. Of course, a lot of decisions that people make are based on emotions, right? But I don't think that's the same thing as them, like, making a decision based on emotions is not the same thing as making an irrational decision. In my opinion, those are two very separate concepts, and like quite often there is no sort of rational way of knowing what to do or what is best, and then you have to rely on something, right? And this is where emotions come into play. It's some sort of I mean, I don't know if I would call it genetic, but like it's some sort of built-in mechanisms that are there to sort of help you make decisions when you cannot like rationally figure out what the best decision should be. I mean, this rational part is what supposedly, or one of the things that supposedly separates us from animals, right? But like then you can say that animals only act upon emotions, and they're doing pretty fine, right? I mean, okay, we're not helping. they were doing better before we started being rational, but evolution does work to some degree, right? And some of these sort of genetically built-in mechanisms are there to help you sort of survive and to multiply, to have offsprings. And
so when was the last time you took a decision because of when was the last time you acted on your emotions instead of rationality?
I think this happens probably on a daily basis, and I think it happens to everyone.
What about some big decisions? Have there been any big decisions that you are like,
if I said I didn't, someone's going to hold me accountable, and then I'm going to remember all of the sort of irrational decisions that I've made.
Oh, but, I have one in mind. I remember
really?
we were.
So maybe you can tell me. Then I'm going to try to justify myself.
It was somewhere on some trip, and I was like standing talking about something, and then you just randomly tackled me, like in rugby, and I was like, "Why?" And you were just like, "I just wanted to," and I was like, "All right."
Yeah, I suppose. I suppose that's. I'm not sure that's a major decision, but actually, maybe it was. Maybe this ultimately changed the course of everything for you, and I just don't know about it. This whole butterfly effect is maybe coming into play here. So first of all, let me apologize for tackling you again, and I guess I will. It's not the last time I hear this one, so I suppose I'm gonna have to apologize again at some point soon. But yeah, I suppose impulsive decisions, or like, I mean, a lot of the stuff that you do just for pleasure, right? You might say is rational. I mean, I don't know. Like, let's take, like, I don't know, eating junk food, right, or drinking alcohol, or anything of the kind, right? I mean, that's sort of, if you want, it's actually rational in the sense that you know that the consequences of that are going to have an impact that is negative on you later on, but then you sort of say, oh, let future me worry about that, right?
Yeah.
So that, I mean, a lot of that is probably would count as decisions made from, I mean, like, yeah, being irrational. Actually, one thing that I found quite interesting, that I've read the other day, in related to this sort of gratification on the short scale, but then not seeing the consequences in the long run, is that there was this experiment where they showed people pictures of like themselves, people that they know, celebrities, and they would sort of measure the reactions of like how I don't really remember the sort of the details of the experiment, but they would just see, whenever this person, I don't know, sees a photo of his loved ones or his children or his parents, like there is some sort of emotional reaction that can be measured, I don't know, by changing heartbeat, or I'm inventing sort of the science part of it. But yeah, and then to get to the point, at one point they would also show a photo of the people themselves, but sort of AI processed to make it look like you in, I don't know, 20 or 30 years, or you as an old person. And funnily enough, people had no emotion at all towards that. And so people don't care about their future self. Like they don't really, it's not someone that, of course, because you don't know your future self yet, right? So you're doing things for the you right now, but not for the you in like 10 or 20 years. And I mean, that explains a lot of what's going on, in my opinion, at least.
Yeah, that makes sense. No, it's yeah. Let the future me care about it.
So I suppose to maybe come back to your question of big rational decisions, I can't straight away give you an example of like a decision that I made, but more I definitely can like think of examples of where I was just like feeling like unhappy or exhausted or not able to like cope with the situation, and it would sort of not be based on some sort of rational thinking, right? I mean, what I'm trying to say is I can think of a lot of examples of like emotions overwhelming me and like sort of clouding my judgment. I mean, that happens regularly.
Like what? Because we're going back. I still have this over-idealized
okay.
image of Fedor, who has it all sorted out. He has this physics framework that he puts on everything, and
I see. Yeah. So I think actually this year was a bit tough in that respect. So I mean, as I mentioned, my son was born a bit over a year ago. And at the time, we were still in Paris. And then I was sort of trying to find jobs in academia, and I wasn't very happy with the opportunities that were presented there. So at one point, I decided to sort of switch and like go for a job in the industry. And so I interviewed with a quantum computing company in Munich. So I mean, the one that I'm working for right now. And I got the job. And so in April, we decided to move to Munich, and at the same time, we sort of we had to take care of little Fedor, and like I had to sort of slightly change my work and learn new things to be able to perform at this job. And then we didn't have an apartment. It took us like 4 months to find an apartment in Munich, just because it's very hard here. And then there were like, okay, so because we are us, we decided that we're going to have a wedding in June. It's actually the wedding we already planned to have 2 years ago, but then the pandemic happened, so that got postponed. And so we got into this point where new job, new place, trying to find an apartment, trying to organize your wedding, trying to do a million other things at the same time, and then having a kid to take care of, without basically, any like direct support from like friends or family, because we just don't know anyone or didn't know anyone at the time in Munich. And yeah, I was really quite unhappy. And like the first, I don't know, I feel like the first month in Munich, I was just I was just terrible to be around. I was constantly like annoyed, nagging, in a bad mood, not wanting to do things. Like, and now in hindsight, I sort of knew that, like deep down, I knew that actually it's not that bad, and I should just get my so to say, get my shit together, and somehow try to see the positives and get out of that hole. But yeah, for quite some time, I was just like, I don't know how Fabian could like stand me, because I was just not like nice to be around, I suppose. And like I couldn't do anything about it. Like deep down, I knew, but like that was just, yeah, like very irrational and very driven by not the right kind of emotions. And being able to control that, right? I mean, emotions are not good or bad, but you should be able to sort of kind of step to the side and look at what's going on in your head from like an outside perspective, and then sort out what is good and bad about it and how you can use it. But that's easier said than done. And yeah.
Yeah. You know what? That I recently viewed this new movie. It's called Stutz, I think, and it's about this therapist or psychotherapist. I don't know what's the right word for him, and he works with a lot of celebrities in, I think, in Hollywood. One of them is Jonah Hill, and he did a movie about him. And it's a very interesting movie, by the way. If you haven't seen it, definitely recommend. It's a lot of fun. But he, in that movie, he said that the only thing that's certain is there will always be pain, uncertainty, and work to do. So that's not something you can kind of avoid, right? Would that be something that we do differently?
Like you're asking in sort of in regards to this experience of moving here. Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, I think I could have definitely just tried to see the positives and try to create happiness somehow, rather than just focus on being unhappy. You would, there'll be a weekend and I'd be like, whatever, doesn't matter. Like, there's nothing we can do on a weekend anyways. We have a kid, so we can't go out. There are like no good restaurants in Munich. Like coming to Munich from Paris was a bit tough in that respect. Even though they are, and I found them later. But I'd be like, oh, there's nothing to do. It's all pointless. Might as well just stay in bed, and well, you can't stay in bed because you have a kid, but like not do anything exciting. But then instead of that, you can just go and try to find something or create something. I mean, you don't really need much, right? You can generate like something interesting to do for yourself. I mean, I don't know, learn a new hobby or just visit places, or I don't know, like I think being proactive in this respect is something that is good, but it's not so easy, especially when you're down.
So how does it, because this wasn't the first time you moved, right? You moved around quite a lot to a lot of different countries, a lot of different places across the world. How was that experience? Because I've been moving around, and I know that sometimes it's tough. You always change the place. It's nice to have friends all around the world, right? Definitely something I'm happy about. But then sometimes you move to a new place, and it can be tough too, because you need to find new friends. You somehow need to keep contact with the old friends. How did you experience this? Because you moved around a lot more than I think.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that. You've moved around quite a lot yourself, right? But yeah, I think it's easier when you're younger, because first of all, you're more like easily excited about things, and I think you also have more time, or like you're quicker at rebuilding a life, and finding friends. Like that's I mean, if I compare going from, say, Slovakia after finished school to Germany for university, or going from Germany to ultimately to London to do my PhD, still there is not that much responsibility that you have, and you have a lot of time. You don't realize it when you're young, but you actually have a lot of time to do things. Of course, you waste most of it, and people older than you will try to explain to you that you shouldn't, but you don't listen. And I guess that's just how the world works. But I would come to London, and within a few weeks, I would know lots of people, do stuff with them, find new hobbies. It's quite easy at least when you're younger, I find. Then now this move was very different in a sense that, we already had some routines established in Paris. I had a life there, had some friends there, and now you have to go sort of back to zero. But it's not obvious that you're going to find all of these friends again quickly. I think also you're getting more selective as you get older with friends, right? You don't just want to hang out with anyone and everyone. You sort of want people who are a bit like the good old friends that you already have, but they're not the ones that are, not in your city, so to say. And finding those people is maybe even not just finding them. Maybe the people you can find the right material for such friends, but it takes time to build that friendship, right? You sort of need to go through adventures together, or even have a common history that you can draw upon when you're meeting again, and then it's a lot easier to hang out with people that for that you've known for a while than people who you've just met, right? It's like a well-seasoned wok pan. There's already a lot of oil, so nothing burns. No, but yeah, I don't know. Even I'm thinking about Paris. Some of the good friends that we made there, I'm thinking about the first, dinners or nights out that we'd have with them, and they were a bit awkward, right? Because you don't really know exactly what to talk about, so you're trying to find common themes, and there is no, you cannot make inside jokes because they don't exist yet. You have to you don't know their opinions about some subjects, so maybe you need to be a bit careful that you don't offend or say the wrong thing, or and that's very different to just going out with your I don't know, homies from like you guys, right? You, Andy, Razo, who was also on this show. We've known each other for forever, so you can pick up where you left off the conversation last time, and as if nothing happened. It's just so much easier. And yeah, anyway, so what I'm trying to say is that establishing this takes time and effort, and if you have a lot of time and not much to do in terms of responsibilities, then that's a lot easier than when you have to start a new job and perform well straight away. You have a kid to take care of, right? And there is no off button for having a kid. It's not like you can decide, oh no, this weekend, forget it. I'm too tired. I'm just going to watch Netflix the whole time and eat pizza that I order in, right? It doesn't work like that. You can't do that. And I think that's why it sort of got under my skin. I think that's why this move was tougher. And I guess every move after that is going to become tougher and tougher yet. Just because, you just realize you've been through this before, and you realize you're starting from zero, you're starting from scratch, and you have to put in the effort again. And then, you might ask, oh, was it even worth putting the effort? Because, or what if I move in a couple of years again? Do I even need friends? Because they'll be gone after that. Of course, that's not the right way of thinking.
The interesting thing is that you talk about meeting these people for the first time and being awkward. I never thought about you this way. I thought you just you to me, you were always this naturally, I don't know, outgoing person that's get in the group, talks to people, and has plenty of story and things to talk about, and it's interesting.
No, but I think that's. Okay, I'm maybe I'm a bit more of an extrovert kind of person, and you're maybe somewhat right about that. That I don't feel too bad about talking to new people. But what I'm trying to say is the quality of the conversation and like the like overall of people talking to each other who just met is going to be different to the one between people who have known each other for a long time, right? And it really depends, right? Sometimes you click. I mean, I've had these moments where you meet a person. Well, actually, I'm speaking to one of them, and then like half an hour later, you're like best friends, and you sort of click immediately. You find all the right topics to talk about. But that's not always the case. And that doesn't mean that those people couldn't become very good friends of yours. It's just that sometimes you need to find a way, and that takes time. It's like a process, and that might be because of you, might be because of them, might be I don't know. Could be a lot of things. But you sort of I think what I'm trying to say is that you kind of have to like invest into a friendship, at least in the start, right? Then maybe it's actually also after, but.
Yeah, like any relationship, right?
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
And I think that one thing that you didn't mention that at least to me is important. And that's why I think we also clicked that fast, and I clicked with Andy and actually everybody in the US group. I have a story like I had with you, and that's about the vulnerability. I think when you when people open up, you can have a different type of conversation, right? If you want to have good quality conversation, like people need to give in something.
That's true.
And that's why I can have, in certain ways, sometimes better conversation with Mraz nowadays than with other people in our group, because he went through certain experiences. He talked about it differently. He's way more vulnerable than he used to be. He used to be this kind of very, how would we say it? I don't want to say robot because that sounds too harsh.
No,
but,
yeah, but
corporate pragmatic, we called it, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's actually always like with this friendship group. It's quite interesting to see how. I mean, the way maybe you wrongfully idealize my life. I think everyone does that, right? And I'm also like, yeah, if I think about Marazo before, he sort of opened up about having, sort of depression issues. Like, yeah, I would have never guessed. I would have thought, no, he just goes to work, does his job brilliantly, goes back, has like some hobbies, is happy, and goes to bed with a smile. But of course, yeah, that's not true, right? But yeah, and I mean that I think opening up about these things is a good thing, and also that's why I value this friendship group so much, because people are quite open, especially for Eastern European standards. I mean,
yeah. We well, we didn't start it that way. let's put it. I think we've been friends so more than 14 years, and I think I've seen people how they changed a lot. Actually, I probably on everybody. Like people became more vulnerable. We talk more about emotion and stuff we didn't talk before. Oh, maybe we talked, but only after like 7 beers. The classic, the classic Eastern European thing.
I think we didn't really know how to talk about it, right? We would talk about it maybe after 7 beers, but we'd just be saying random things and like really couldn't. At least I feel like that myself. Like I wouldn't have been 10 years ago. I wouldn't have been able to really properly phrase what's wrong or what I'm trying to say about. Like I think one might say the vocabulary got better on our side, right? We understand the concepts a bit better, and we can then maybe talk more in detail or like more deeply. Don't you think?
Yeah, I think it's part of it. And I think the other part is the experience. People like went through a different type of shits in their life, or shitstorms, as somebody said to me once. And I think that even if it happens to your friends, I think indirectly to some way it changes you, right? Because you hear about a
Yeah,
lot of things
definitely.
happening, but you're always like, yeah, well, but that the kind of in your head. Maybe you don't even like say it out loud, but I think there's this like thought, like, okay, but that will never happen to like we are all doing great. It's gonna be great, and then you like through life things happen, and you start realizing like, oh shit, like these thing happens, and they happen like to people I love around. So I think that changes people. And I have a question for you because I never ask you, but how did you experience Liz dying? Because I was always focused on myself when that happened, but I never really talked to many people about like, well how did they process it or felt it?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so I think first a bit of background, and that is due to the pandemic, right? I've never really met her in person, right? We have never been in the same room, which is a bit, I think this somehow is important to my, like say reaction, because on one hand, I know you, right? And I understood what's happening to you, but I only met her. I think we zoomed twice maybe. So we did a pub quiz once where you guys were part of it, and I think we zoomed once just like for fun during the pandemic when everyone
No,
was sort of close
I
inside.
remember, and I don't know if we zoomed. I think we zoomed.
Yeah,
Or called when you when you announced us that you're
yes,
gonna have Fedor. I remember that one.
yeah,
We're
that was just
playing.
a call. That wasn't a
Just
Zoom. That was a call. But I also called you, right? Even back then. So I understood that she was in the room, right? And I think maybe she even said something
yeah.
quickly on the phone, right? But ultimately the call was with you. So to me, the two times that I got like to know her a tiny bit, at least, um, was the two Zoom sort of calls, with one being the pub quiz. And so I think due to not knowing her that well, I think I focused a lot more on sort of feeling terrible for you, and sort of, again, you're completely right. This is one of those things where you you think of, I don't know, something like suicide. You think of it as a faraway concept that happens to people who are not you or your friends, and you don't really, right? I mean, you can, I mean, of course you can relate, right? You understand that it's terrible, but you could never imagine what a person feels, right? Both the person, both the person who commits suicide, or the person or the people who are left behind and have to sort of deal with the consequences of that. And so, yeah, I mean, okay, so this was actually the second instance that I got into contact with sort of suicide. One of them being, the first one was a family friend of ours committed suicide a couple of years before that, and actually that also hit me personally, because he was sort of, okay, when I was a teenager, I was really into martial arts, and he was the guy who sort of introduced me to Aikido, because he was already like going to he was part of an Aikido club in Bratislava, and then at one point he was like, "Hey, you want to come like check it out?" And then I went, and for a couple of years actually I did it, and I loved it. And so, twice or three times a week I would like walk a couple streets and get into his car, and we would drive to the practice and then drive back, and talk about music, and so, I mean, to some degree, okay, he was of course quite a bit older than me, so more like a friend of my parents, but still, it was kind of like nearly a friendship sort of thing. And then, yeah, and then somehow, oh, I mean, at some point, of course, I moved abroad, and I would maybe see him once in a long time, and I sort of only through like my parents heard that sort of his marriage didn't go very well, and they split up, and then he was kind of doing soul searching, but couldn't really find anything to grasp to. And then one day, basically, my parents called me, my mom called me, I think, and told me that he committed suicide, and that was quite shocking. And so that was, sorry, I went a bit on a tangent. So that was the first time I ever sort of experienced that, and so I got a bit of the feeling of what it sort of means to be the people left behind. And then I mean, I've when you well, wasn't I haven't first heard it from you, right? I heard it from Peter Sivacek, so Sivo, another friend of ours. I think he was the first one to tell me. And I just felt terrible. I mean, both for her, and I was just shocked because you two seemed like, such a great couple, and like I would have never guessed. And then I was just really terrified for like what this is going to do to you, and how you can get out of it. Because on a sort of very maybe stupid but like pragmatic level, she's gone, but you have to I mean, you have to deal with the consequences, right? You still, like, there is I don't know if I'm formulating this the way I want to, but I was just basically worried about you and trying to think how I could help you, and hoping that this is not going to also spiral your life out of control, or do irreparable damage to it. And I'm actually very glad to see that I think it did not. I think you actually managed like exceptionally well for the circumstances. I understand that that's something that you don't ever lose, or that's something that you'll bear with you for the rest of your life. This sort of like this happening.
I don't know. I don't really know if there's like a good way of managing it or bad way of managing it. It's kind of a weird concept to me.
I agree.
And of course, it stays with you, and it's also something that it's not like, oh, you made it through your first week and then it's done. It's something that comes back and it goes, comes back and it goes, and sometimes it's stronger, and sometimes it's weaker. And it probably gets somewhat better over time, like a long time, over a long time. But it's definitely something that stays with you. It's something that definitely changes you in many ways. Yeah.
I think maybe one of the stories one of the sort of events that I remember related to Liz's suicide is that at some point later, right, our common friend Andy, he had his, he was going to have his wedding, and he had his sort of bachelor's kind of weekend where we all decided to go to Romania to hang out, and just, it felt a bit like one of these trips that we've done in our friendship groups to random places and to just hang out with your friends and bond. And of course this was not very long after Liz's death, and you were supposed to go, and we were all like really unsure whether that's gonna do you any good at all, to sort of be in a sort of situation where people are supposedly having fun and drinking, I don't know, having going out, all of this, but you said you're gonna go, and I thought, well, okay, great.
By the way, I also wasn't sure.
Of course, yeah. I mean,
and
no one can know, right? There is no experience to draw upon whether this is a good idea or not.
And we talked about the kind of emotional decisions or something. And actually, I don't know if it's emotional decision, but I kind of felt it made sense, and I didn't know what's gonna do. But on the other hand, it also kind of rationally, I thought I either gonna be in Prague, where I was dreaded every minute of being alone, and usually only people can be certain amount of time with you, and then you kind of emotionally maybe drain them. I never really thought about it, but maybe. And so I was always looking forward for other people who came around and talked to me or called me, or like something I could kind of get through time, really, at that point, I think. And here I was, and either being there, and it meant that where you went there, it also meant a lot of people left Prague. Actually, a lot of people who were there, like, Libor and Ola, they moved away at the same time. And my other friend went to Israel. So, like, a lot of people were not in Prague. And then I could be with people that I really love for a whole weekend, which makes sense. Okay, the circumstances questionably of what it's gonna do. And I think ultimately, I'm. It sounds like a weird thing to do, maybe in this time, but I think it helped me because I was there with people I love, and I could have. I had a lot of conversations with different people. I got a little bit distracted. So, yeah.
Yeah. So about that. So about that time, we were then. So we made it to Romania, right? To Bucharest, and so I remember sort of deciding that my strategy for like how to best well, I was thinking not really like help you, but like I think my strategy was that I'm going to just treat you the way I would always treat you, like on any of these events, and just like if you want to talk about Liz, we'll talk about Liz, but I'm like not going to ask you things about it, not going to push you in that direction, and just try to have fun with you, right? And like make you maybe not forget, but get distracted. I think you said it right. And then so I did that for one day, and I think a couple other people sort of came to the same conclusion. And then I remember you coming to me, and you were actually sort of, I don't know, like what the emotion was, maybe disappointed, or like you weren't understanding, like you wanted the opposite. You actually wanted to talk about it, right? And that was very sort of revelatory. Like I didn't, it was exactly the opposite to what I thought would be good for you. But of course, you never know, right? Because none of us have ever been in that situation. Yeah, and that's, I mean, I was thinking about that a lot since then, that like actually, but maybe, yeah, is it, what do you think? Do you think it's like ultimately um, better to talk about these things for everyone, or is it just you personally that you felt it's better to talk about it than not? Um, like maybe my question to you is like, what does a person in such a situation long for, like from friends? I mean, okay, I understand other than just their mere presence.
That's wow, difficult question. So first of all, I would say yes, it's better to talk about it, but I also would say at whoever, like at your own time, um, because everybody needs different time. And I kind of decided very early on that I'm going to talk about it. I don't know, it just felt right,
Mm-hmm.
And so I was very honest with everybody, and then like people come to me like, "Oh, we're not going to tell the grandma. We're going to tell her some story." And I was like, I mean, she's growing up, like you're just gonna like lie to her. It's like that this happened. Like there's like you can't change it. It's it just felt that that's the way. And then you said what the person needs. I think you need to ask. Like you, I don't think there's any better way than asking, because like I think one of the reason that and I talked about it in some other episode, I think, is that when people when you are in like at least the first maybe few weeks or months, when I was meeting somebody and they kind of didn't acknowledge that it happened, it felt really weird. It felt like it wasn't important, or yeah, it's like it's not important enough to even like say something about it. And also the other thing is you have to think about it that everything else for me was at the time bullshit. I remember being like in some supermarket with my dad at one point, and there was these things happening, and I was like, why are people doing this? Why they are here? Like, are they argued about some bullshit? About whatever, to buy something black or white, and I was like, it's like a meaningless discussion to have. Like, why even bothered? And so yeah, so that kind of I perceive like most of the conversations. It definitely is nice to be distracted. I had another friend, but he went through a lot of shit. His mom died. Um, his brother also had some like issues, and he was basically alone because his parents were divorced. So he had to like take care of a lot of things. And I met him at one point, and he didn't like. Actually, I met him with Siwa. I kind of blasted everything on him, and then at the end of and I didn't know that he didn't know. I thought he knew what happened, but he didn't. So I kind of like blasted everything on him. I don't know. And then at the end he was like, "Let's go for a walk to the forest next day because my parents live next to the forest." And we went on a walk, and we walk around, and he didn't mention this even once. And with him, it felt okay because I knew, like maybe I felt like he understands because he have through something similar. So I didn't really. It was okay to not have this acknowledgement, like, okay, this happened, and that acknowledgement doesn't have to always come with, words. Sometimes comes with hack or something.
Yeah, I was about to ask how, like, what a good way of acknowledging it is, because of course from the point of view of, let's say, well, your friend, right, or someone who's trying to sort of help you or be there for you, it's also not so clear what is good and what is not and how to do it. And of course, even asking feels so. You said like, oh, you should just ask what the person needs, right? Even that feels a bit like you're already failing, right? You're like, you should know what your friend needs. That's how, like, I remember our first, I think that was the first time I called you after it happened. And we had a pretty long call. And the whole call I just had no idea what to say. Like, we were basically, I feel like there were also like really long moments of just silence from both sides because I suppose you were just devastated, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out what I could say to make you feel better or to give support, right? Or I cannot, like, I would obviously say those things like, I'm sorry, and I don't know, you're gonna get through this, but like, I don't even, I still don't know if that's what, like, a person in your situation wants to hear, or right. I remember the one thing that sort of um, worked, and I think that's how the conversation went towards the end, was where we would just start talking about like old memories or just like completely unrelated things, but we would just have a conversation and it would feel good. And I felt like that was the only thing that kind of worked. But I guess in terms of, well, acknowledging Liz death, I mean, okay, yeah, obviously I acknowledged it, right, because we talked about it, but I wasn't sure like how I can actually help, right?
Well, I think there's a couple of things in that. One, the fact that you took the action and you called me, it's already so much. Because, you said, like, I don't know what to say. But then imagine how much harder is for the person on the other side.
For sure, yeah.
Because you're even more fucked up and you don't know what you can't. So I think that's one thing. I also don't think there's, like, you can just say, I don't know what to say. Actually, a lot of people know that. Yeah, some people said it, like, I don't know what to say.
I said
fine.
that, yeah, I remember.
Because, yeah, but that's fair, Like, I don't, what do you think? Do you think I know what to say about it? I don't know what to say about it too. It didn't make any sense to me, So, yeah, and then just ask because you don't know, and I think that's I would be leaning in towards the fact that there's probably a lot less bad things you can do when you take the action and talk to people than there is of bad thing that you can say and really disrupt the person, because I mean they already went through so much. Everything else seems like such a small thing. You can, like, I don't know, like. I remember once it was at a different wedding, because there were two weddings. There was Andy's wedding, there was Jacob weddings after or before, I don't know. And I was talking to somebody, and they were like, "Yeah, well, like, what happened?" Because I was not like looking my best. And I kind of told them about what happened, and they literally, like, I stopped talking and they left, like without saying anything, you know.
Oh my God.
And I was like, that's and you could say, you know, I could be angry or something, but yeah, it was weird. But at the same time, my emotions were in so much like other things that this was like, okay, whatever. No.
Mhm.
I think I'm like, if anything, I think I do have some resentment that I'm still trying to work out through to people who didn't really get in touch with me.
I see.
Because it feels like I'm going through this shit and we've been friends or whatever, and you can't even me like text me or give me a call or say anything, you know, like when I really needed you, because that's for friends, right? For right. So yeah,
So that happened?
yeah,
I see.
yeah, 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 with few people. It's and I, and I shouldn't have that resentment because I don't know, probably people don't know how to talk about it and it's tough, but it's still there and it's something I have to work out through, right? Like step by step. Yeah. Those these are feelings, like you said, like controlling feelings, but I think you just also need to like feel it. I logically know, I should maybe try to resolve that resentment instead of carrying it with me, and talk to the people. But still, there is the feeling. So, it needs some time probably for me to get to the point where I can like work it out. Um, or maybe they'll just get lost and.
Slightly related, but maybe also slightly unrelated question. Like, now you've been on the other side of the globe for a while.
Hmm.
How do you feel this is helping you, or do you feel it is helping you?
That's a great question. I do think it helps me because, first of all, being here makes me kind of feel closer to this because it's a Latvian culture and people are warmer. I don't know. We both like traveling, so traveling is also something that I enjoy. Not all the time, to be honest, on this trip, but sometimes. So that's something. I think it also helps because you meet a lot of different people, and if you feel and you can be vulnerable with them, I had many conversations that kind of helped my healing. That gave me a different perspective. That allowed me to talk about it because honestly, you can talk about it with your friends for so long, but I can't really remember last time somebody asked me about this, or something like that. Just those conversations like kind of vanished, um, and I think I still need to talk about it sometimes. So I think that helps, and I think that this kind of death of somebody close to you, I think opens a lot of also question about yourself, lots of your insecurities and things. And this trip has been a lot about kind of dealing with them. It doesn't come like suddenly, but some things happens, and then a few months down the road, you're like, oh man, like I don't know, like in that movie that I talk about, the Stutz, right? They talk about this non-attachment, which I think is related to the fact that everything you have is on borrowed time and it will disappear one day. And I think we have this romantized ideas of every, like, you have friends for life, you have this for life and that for life, but it doesn't really work like that. And we live longer time. The world is more chaotic and disruptive, and people move around, all kind of fun of things. So a lot of the time, a lot of the relationships, not just like romantic, but also friendships, like kind of vanish and things. And to me, like, when I felt like a deep connection with somebody I met, I formed like these deep connections, and then those people like vanished, and that was very hurtful. And it was hurtful because I felt like I'm losing another person, and I already lost one person that I love. And kind of learning how to deal with this, I think that's what the travel helps for. Because in travel, you will meet a lot of people, and they will be nice, and you will have sometimes a deep connection. Because people are more vulnerable and they don't really give a shit about what they say as much, and they have less filters. So kind of having those connections and being able to let go, I think helps processing things. So that's one like example.
So, do you have one singular event that happened through your trip, where you would say, like, sort of, I don't know, it kind of something clicked for you, or you sort of made progress by just that one event or something like that?
I don't know if there's like, like for example, watching this movie. If I go back to it now,
Okay.
but because that was really powerful, and but it's not a single event, because I can relate to things in the movie as I think back about the trip. Like those things kind of click together. I don't think there's like
Hmm.
one singular event that like, oh, this is it. I think it's an event that kind of brings things together. Maybe that would be a better way to go. Um, but for example, I had a really bad side of the trip. The first 3 weeks, I did not enjoy much. There were some nice moments, but it was tough. And then I landed in this beach town in north of Brazil, and I got there with a group of people that were really good. And the hostel was good, and it was just this magical vibe, and people really connected. But for me, it was still difficult. I didn't know how to talk about people about should I tell them, should I not tell them, and I kind of didn't want to maybe tell them even. And that it was also a death anniversary of Liz at the same time.
Hmm.
Um, and then I watched. I got a DVD from her sister about Liz, which I thought was like memories of Liz, and and it's gonna sound really weird, but I was scared to open it. I don't know why, but I thought like if I'm gonna see it, it's gonna like completely fuck me up. Um,
I think that
so
actually makes complete sense, no? That you were scared to open it. I mean,
yeah, maybe yeah. Um, I don't know, but I didn't open it. I opened it, but then on her death anniversary, I decided I'm gonna watch it. I felt like okay, I think I'm ready. I'm gonna watch it, and it wasn't just memories of her; it was also her funeral. Just very strange to watch because I didn't go to that funeral. It was on the other side of the world, and mm,
do you think this seeing the funeral gave you some sort of closure?
maybe maybe I don't know. It was difficult to see Liz kind of in the funeral, but it was also nice to hear other like her family mostly talking about her. That was really nice. But what happened the next day was kind of I think it was the next day or the 2 days after. I had this like Zen day. I was so calm. I was so present. Uh, Everything was just like nice, easy. It's like a really blissful day, I would say. And I had many conversations about Liz with a lot of different people. And then I talked to this guy, and we started talking. And then he was like, "Yeah, my grandma died, and his grandma was very important to him because she was kind of his mom because I think something happened to his mom, so she was taking care of him." And then I told him about what happened to Liz, and uh, and then he told me, "Yeah, I had a girlfriend. We broke up, and she died by suicide as well, like 1 month before we had this conversation." And I'm sitting there
Oh.
with this guy, and it's just so surreal because you're like, "This is happening just to me," and then you're like, "No, this is not just happening to you. It's happening to other people around you." Um, and I cannot imagine. I can not really put in words of why I thought that experience was important on the journey, but somehow it was. Um, it was also the fact that we could talk about it, and there was something to share. And uh,
Did you find that the way he was dealing with it was sort of similar to yours, or did he have a different approach?
mm, I don't think we talk about it so much in this way
Hmm.
because I don't know. It was 1 month that it happened, and we talk about it. Well, we didn't talk about it like, okay, so let's sit down and let's write our notebooks of how we're dealing with things. Like I saw the conversation like you, you, I
No, of
there's
course,
not
but
like a framework or theoretical
I understand.
thing how to do with it. Uh, I think it's more about talking about the feelings, about the stuff, and just the fact that you can be there with that person and talk about it. Because for me, I had a person who had went through the same thing like me, pretty much, who reached out to me and who kind of you can say mentor me or have been there for me in a way that other people can't really because they don't have the same experience.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's always helpful. And being able to kind of be on the other side maybe and try to kind of be there for somebody who went through something like that. I think that's part of the healing experience.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure.
How does it feel to have this conversation?
Good, actually. I think I was meaning to have this kind of conversation with you. I mean, ever since it happened, but it's never so simple, right? Because we don't like when we have a call, right? It's more like hey, how's it going? What's new? Sort of update. It's always one of us, having to run somewhere to do something. We never take the time to, have this sort of deeper discussion about what happened in person. And most of the time, if we meet, like, in real life, that normally means that it's not just the two of us, but it's a whole friendship group. And then again, it's not the same thing because, yeah, even if you find a bit of time, like within whatever evening or day, that is with all the others, there's always someone else coming in or talking about something or joining or it's so yeah, having like this longer, deeper conversation with you, I think is something I really meant to do for a while to sort of understand, especially like going back to what I was mentioning about Romania. Like I still felt that this sort of left questions for me, right? Where I was like, okay, I feel like I maybe didn't like help you or didn't approach it the best way I possibly could, but also I don't know what it is, right? I couldn't quite understand how else one should approach. And I mean, maybe we're still not, we're a bit wiser, but like we're not at the point where we have all the answers. But at least I can see your side of the coin a bit better. And this, like, I really like that the part where you said that to a person where something like this happens, the details of like a conversation like this, they're not that important, right? On the big scale of things, they're just noise. So it's like the gesture is important, and I suppose maybe the content to some degree, right? But it's like there is not one like particular wrong thing that you'll say, and that's gonna like make it really bad for you because it's already really bad. So like yeah, I think this is quite like yeah. This reveals a bit to me like what was going on in your head at the time.
By the way, I had a lot of these conversations at your wedding as well.
I see. Okay. Yeah. I was not part of that because I was too busy.
That's okay.
Like,
and there was no expectation
doing the wedding.
of.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense. So about my wedding, did you, or actually any wedding that you went to after that, did that, were you like fine with going to weddings, or did that give you somehow a bittersweet taste because this would kind of remind you of your loss?
Yeah, I said it in the zero episode. I think that there's this kind of a nice side of it when you are around people that you love, and like all the weddings that I went to, well, actually they were free. There were your, Andy's, and my friend James' wedding, and all the people on there are people I very much like. They're all amazing people. So that's really nice. But at the same time, it's like I was supposed to go there with Liz, at least to the first wedding. I'll probably go to your as well if she would be here, right? So it's also sad to be there and not being able to be there with her, not being able to experience this moment, and partially maybe also not being able to have this moment with her. And finally, also, but it's come less about the wedding, but more about the fact before, right? That all of our friends are almost married. There's not that many left. There's only Siwa, right?
No,
Victor.
I mean, okay, Siva, Victor, yeah. But there are a couple of them who are engaged but not married yet.
Okay, but
okay,
potato, whatever.
they can still change their mind. I think there's time.
Yeah, I don't know. I actually had a conversation recently about it, and there was, I think that that is this kind of sad. No, I think that makes me feel alone because it makes me feel like people are leaving to a certain new stage of life, and I'm not there, and everybody pretty much is, and I'm not there. And it's not even that I want to be in that stage; it's just the fact that I am the only one who is basically not there. Uh, um,
It's sort of a funny thing, right? Because people were together before the wedding, and then it's some sort of one day where they celebrate themselves being together, and then they go back to being together the same way they were like 2 days before, right? And all of a sudden they're married, and supposedly it's a new stage of life, but in reality nothing changed, right? I mean, yeah, I
yeah,
mean, so of course, and I understand the part where, like, the part of feeling alone when everyone's sort of coupled up, but the wedding part somehow actually, well, I don't want to call it a farce, right? Because I mean, I've just had a wedding, but in
Fabian's gonna be
reality,
happy.
I mean, she has the same opinion. No, but I mean, I think our approach to a wedding was a bit of a, we just, and we're not very religious, and okay, the taxes don't get that much better if you are married, but ultimately it was just a really nice opportunity, and I think a sort of once in a lifetime opportunity to have a day, or like multiple days, because we went sort of to the mountains afterwards with some of our friends, and like, it's a day where you can sort of invite all of your family and friends and anyone you hold dear, anyone you like, and they sort of all have to come and have to have fun with you. And that's kind of amazing.
I had to have fun. I didn't know that was
Yeah,
part
and
of the
well,
game.
of course, I'm exaggerating, but most of them will come, and and you have, like, I think one of the most amazing moments, like, unrelated now to the actual wedding ceremony and so on, was in the very beginning, where sort of most of the crowd already gathered, and I was just trying to go to sort of the place which was in the back of sort of this area where we would have the ceremony, to sort of set up a couple of things with the organizer, and I was trying to get through that crowd of people who already gathered there, and it was impossible. Like, I'll just go from one person, like, "Hi, how's it going? I haven't seen you in like years. Oh my god!" Like, exchanging 2 words, to just like straight away being like, "Oh my god, there is a person I haven't seen even longer." Who's like, and it took me. I think it took me like at least, I don't know, half an hour, if not a whole hour, to just make it to that wedding ceremony spot. And then, and then I set up whatever I needed to, and I was like, "Oh no, I have to go back again. Like, we're never gonna get married because there's just too many people I want to talk to." So I think, I don't know, probably to both Fabienne and myself, this was like one of the best aspects of having that wedding, and I think that's also why we didn't want to do it. Like, when the pandemic hit, some people sort of just did it with a small number of guests, or just like by themselves, and we didn't want to do that because that was sort of defeating the whole purpose of us doing it.
Yeah.
That's why we waited for 2 years.
No, it makes sense. But maybe to go back is maybe it's less about the wedding and more about the babies.
Yeah,
It's kind of comes with the wedding. If people are gonna get married, most of our friends in these friend groups are gonna have kids. I think. Yeah, that's fair to say. Well, most of them already have kids, so it's not
that's true.
a big overstatement.
Not most of them, right? It's,
A half,
I mean,
maybe.
it's no, a bit less than half, right? It's
A
just,
little bit less. Oh.
so there's still time. But I agree, I agree with you that that things change considerably more when you have a kid than when you're getting married. Um, and maybe that's also a bit to the surrounding, because again, like you have a kid, but you're the same person more or less inside that you were, half a year ago, or like before you were pregnant or had a kid. And it's not like people change. We're not like, you don't just somehow become a parent and all of a sudden you're like, like this leveled up Pokemon and you have new superpowers or anything. You're just, you have more struggles and you're somehow trying to survive. That's what happens. But like on the inside, you're still the kid, right? I mean, that you were like, this kid's voice that you have is like when you're young, it doesn't stop when you get older and, have a proper job or get a degree in something. And it also doesn't stop when you have a kid. You're just somehow, you have to maybe have your shit together a tiny bit more to, make things work. But again, doesn't,
I think that's the interesting thing, because I kind of agree with you. And also there's this, like, you are the same person. I am the same person I have been before in some way. I'm still Danik. I'm still positive person, although sometimes, I'm a mess. But at the same time, I am different, same, but different. Like, I am same, but that experience changed me. And I would imagine that with the fatherhood is some, like, you are the same person, but there's another part of you, there's this another world that you are now living in. So you have these two worlds that you are. I don't know how it is with being parent, because I'm obviously not, but I think there's something about yeah, there is something that's
no,
different and something that's
for
same.
sure, something changes. I mean, starting with all the hormones that your body starts to generate for you to sort of, be a good parent, like in terms of like, that's how evolution wanted it, right? All the oxytocin you get when you're sort of, I don't know, hugging your kid. I mean, that's just there. So you take care of your child. But I mean, if we forget about the biology part of it for a second, for sure, you just, feel different emotions. You care about different things. You really form bond with your kid, right? And I mean, so I mean, I would be lying if I said, nothing changed, right? I mean, maybe you said it well, that there's just another sort of, like another new part of you that now exists, and or somehow coexists with the old you. And maybe also there is some internal fight for power, right? Of like the decision making, like
Yeah.
who's in charge.
What's the most difficult part about being dad for you?
Um, I think in general, the no off button aspect of it, I think that's like, I mean, if you take anything else, like let's say something where you need to take responsibility, like a job, right? If you don't like your job, you can quit your job. I mean, or I don't know, like you have to water your plant once a week. I mean, someone can water it for you and it'll be fine. Or okay, the plant dies, you buy a new one unless you're super attached to it. Like, you cannot just stop being a parent, right? And no one can do it for you. Like, you have to do it. And I think this is like, I'm still sort of speaking from a position of privilege, because it's a lot more true for sort of the female part, right? For the mother, and it's like, especially if she's like breastfeeding, or we now went through a phase with little Fedor, where he somehow decided for a couple of weeks that he only cares about his mum, and I'm basically trashed and not to be dealt with. And so he just, like, whenever I try to, play with him, grab, like hold him, any of that, he would immediately cry and just want to go to her, which is annoying both for her and for me, because she just has to like constantly, nonstop, like day in, day out, be with him, like to the point that you can't go to the toilet, without your kid crying, or you have to take him with you, or something. Like, and for me, I'm trying to help, but he just doesn't want to have any of me. And now, like, it changed. All of a sudden, he's like a lot more open. We can play again, and those are just phases. And but yeah, there's crazy stuff like that happening, and you sort of have to deal with it. Yeah, I mean, there's also, of course, there's also this aspect of, other people telling you what to do and how to be a parent, and you constantly thinking, oh, am I a good parent, am I not a good parent, comparing yourself to, again, the sum of everyone else in the positive way rather than looking at the negatives. And you're like, I don't know, oh, that kid like learned to speak earlier, and that kid like managed to walk earlier, and that kid like knows how to eat with a fork. I don't know, like all of these things.
Yeah.
And I mean, everyone ultimately will eat with a fork and will speak and walk, right? I mean, I don't know of anyone who's still struggling. I mean, okay, and of course, of like the healthy sort of children, one has to put a caveat. But
Are these conversation that you are having with Fabian? Like, oh my god, this day kids just start walking and we are not there, right?
absolutely, yeah. Of course, we then say like, oh, it really doesn't matter. He will do it eventually. But somehow, like, you don't want it to be a competition, but it's still, I think there's some subconscious part of you which sees it that way, right? Because then, like, and funnily enough, it's not like you're thinking, oh, my son is a failure. It's more like, oh shit, I should have bought him this, I don't know, like, there are these like big soft objects like that they can crawl on, right? And at some point we were thinking about buying them, but then we didn't. And now we're like, oh, maybe if we bought those objects, like these like, they're not pillows, but they're a bit like firmer, so you can crawl on top of them and like crawl back. Like maybe he would have crawled earlier. Now he maybe would have been walking, and then you're starting to think about it that way. But then, why does it matter, right? Why does he need to like crawl or walk at any given time? I mean, yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things again where you somehow become irrational, and you're thinking about all these things, but it doesn't matter.
He needs to have a crawling pillow.
Yeah, well, I don't know what they're called, like crawling castle. I mean, they're just You see, you can tell I didn't buy it because I don't know the name of it. Otherwise, you get a whole different like vocab of like toys and things for your kid that you have to learn. Yeah.
Yeah. What other part of you I over-idealize?
Well, definitely the sports, because I haven't played rugby for like a year now. That's something that is a bit also like, it's a lot harder to have hobbies on the side when you have a kid, and I'm trying to get back into it. Like, actually, I haven't been playing rugby, but I've been bouldering, like indoor bouldering again. But
right.
But not much. Like, no, frankly, like I can count the times on two hands probably in the last year. So it's not like, but yeah, you sort of forget to do these things because everything else is happening around you, and it's so easy to just stop doing something, right? I mean, I don't know, like I used to go running a lot, and then I started going running less because I don't know, like never found the time or opportunity. And of course there is time and opportunity, you just have to sort of, realize it.
Yeah.
And then you realize, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I haven't been running for a couple of months. And it's not like, you somehow maybe feel less happy, less fit, like your brain is a bit more foggy, but like, of course nothing else will happen. You'll be okay. It's not like life depends on you doing these things, but then you don't do them, and you somehow feel like more stressed, less, happy, less at ease, and like, it takes, you need to somehow consciously think like, well, why is this? And then you realize, oh, maybe I just haven't been doing these things that I like for a while. And
Basics.
It's a bit. This reminds me a bit of the sort of the difference between being hungry and being thirsty, right? Being hungry, you're just like, oh, I'm really hungry. I want to eat, right now. And you're immediately thinking of, oh, I'm going to get this, I don't know, massive burger or whatever. And being thirsty somehow is more like, oh, I have a slight headache and I can't concentrate. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, at least that's how it works for me. Like, there, it's not like, oh yeah, I'm really thirsty. Like, that's not a thing, right? It's more like some conscious feeling not good, but you can't really pinpoint it. And somehow I see there a parallel to these things, like to, I don't know, like for example, doing sports, right? It's not like if you're gonna get like unfit, like I mean, you can live like that, right? Nothing like too bad will happen. but somehow you're just constantly thinking like, I can't concentrate at work. Somehow I have like my mood is not right. I have mood swings, like constantly a bit depressed. I don't know what's going on, right? And then like at some point you're like, why don't you just go for a run? You go for a run, and right after the run, you're like, oh my God, like someone took a filter away from like my life and everything's better again, right? I mean,
Yeah.
So you're definitely over-idealizing my sporting sort of shape. But I promise I'll be better.
Any other things we should say?
I don't know. I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now. I mean, you still have your question for me, right?
Yes. We need to definitely address that. So, what's the one thing that I or the listeners can do in coming week if they feel stuck or lost in their life? One concrete action.
Right. And then, so I was trying to think of something that, like, I wouldn't just preach, but I actually do or enjoy, and something that kind of helped me, or like that I liked, like, I don't know, over the years, in the context of maybe finding your compass. And so I'll try to explain what I'm trying to suggest, and we can see how far we get. So yeah, I know.
Are you gonna talk about you go to a computer, you start programming? No, you take little papers and you start making a duck out of it, and then you make a nose and eye, and then you talk to the duck.
Yes, that's called rubber ducking. That's how you debug your code. No, I'm not going to talk about that. But that's on a side note. That's a good strategy. It really works. No, so sometimes you get these moments like at a random point during the day or whenever, where you think of something and you think, oh, this would be a great idea, and then you sort of let it go. And I'm not talking about, like, it shouldn't be related to your work or shouldn't be about something you're trying to achieve, but like, let me give you an example, right? Every now and then I get this feeling like I'm chatting with someone and we think of some hilarious connection between things. And then I go, in my head, I'm like, oh, this would be a perfect thing if I could elaborate on that one could sort of build part of a stand-up comedy act with this, right? And then I go like, ha, 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 and I forget about it. And so there are instances in my life where I, like, not in particular for the comedy, but like where I actually acted on it. And I was like, no, let's not just forget about this idea, but let's come back to it and try to actually do something about it and try to be somehow creative about it. Like, I don't know, like one example of something I could remember, because of course, then I was like, okay, do I actually ever do that? And I was trying to remember instances where I do. So at one point, like, I think I was like 20 or so, and I wanted to buy like a hat, like a winter hat. And I went to like 5 shops, and all of the hats were terrible. And I was like, oh my God, how hard is it to crochet a hat or that I would actually like? And then I was thinking about it, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to figure it out. And then I went and I bought the crochet, and actually I did a hat for myself. And then I did another 10 hats for people and gave them for Christmas presents. And ultimately that was a great feeling, because you did something creative. You did something that you didn't know and explored. And
why is that not a business? Why are you not selling? Why are you not a hat man?
I don't know. Actually, they were really not that bad. I even created like this little logo sign, so it would look like a legitimate hat, and people would be like, "Oh, where can I buy that?" Just because I had the logo sign on it. The logo was like a so I drew it in some sort of simple drawing app. It was like a tree, and then the roots would like become a barcode. And I thought that was somehow cool at the time. I don't really know why, but like people were like, oh yeah, this tree barcode like hat. Where can I get one? And like I was like, and whenever that happened, I was super proud, telling them that, oh no, I did it myself. Ha ha ha.
Maybe you should go back to that, man.
I don't know, but ultimately, that was a pretty cool experience, and that's something I can tell as a story now. And I actually think I still have 1 or 2 of those hats somewhere at home in Slovakia if I try to find them. And it doesn't have to be a hat. You don't even have to build something like
I'm gonna try to I'm gonna try to take all the things he said and boil it down to something. But I will boil the ocean to get, as they say, the consultants. No, would that action be? I'm just trying to think about it. How do I make it concrete for people so they can actually follow it very simple? Because saying like note down something when you remember, it's like nobody's gonna do it. But can we say that what people should do in the coming week is try to note down when you have some creative idea that you like, note it down, and then at the end of the week, select one that you're going to work on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a good first point. And again, this idea should not be about your daily life. Like, it shouldn't be something you're doing already at work. It shouldn't be something that you're doing for the money it should just be for the pleasure of it, right? Because you're curious about it. Because I think as soon as there is like a particular kind of destination, or like, again, in the sense that, okay, I'm doing this for work, right? Then you're putting a lot of pressure on yourself already to perform, and like immediately maybe that's counteractive. Or you can like you shouldn't be able to fail at this task, right? I mean, the worst thing that can happen is that, okay, well, you thought about the idea, you tried to do something about it for a while, and it wasn't the right one. Maybe you'll try it for the next one, right? But you shouldn't I think I'm trying to set it up such that people don't immediately feel all the pressure of the world. Oh no, now I really need to think of a good idea, and I really need to create something amazing from it, because of course that's not how the world works. But just kind of, not just give up on the idea and be like, oh no, okay, well, I'm not a person who crochets hats or does stand-up comedy, forget it. But just try.
I agree. And also, one thing that I like about you a lot is the curiosity. I remember when we were in Portugal, and we were eating the pasta de natas. Great cake, by the way. If you ever go to Portugal, love it. And then we were the next day walking somewhere else, and they also has the pasta de natas. And my immediate reaction would be, get another pasta de natas. Why not? And you were like, no, we already had one. Let's try another one. And it's such a bullshit story, but that thing stick with me, I still oftentimes it pop up in my hand when I'm somewhere going to the same place, buying the same stuff, and I'm like, no, today I'm going to try something else. And maybe I'm not going to like it, that's fine. That's part of the kind of the experimentation, curiousness, all right? Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose, being curious really is quite rewarding quite often. Oh, you also sometimes get terrible cake as a result. You have to,
yes.
be prepared for that. But it happened to me so many times that, I'd go to a restaurant where I already know that there is a really good dish. And I'm like, oh no, but this time I can't just always take the very good dish. And I'll take a different one, but then whoever I'm with will take the good dish. And then I'm sitting there having the other one, which turns out to be not so good, and thinking, why am I always doing this? But then for every time that happened, I would also find an even better dish, right? And then that was why it ultimately was worth it.
Yeah, and I bought this some Chilean fruit. What is it? Chimarroyo, something chim. I don't know how it's pronounced. Doesn't matter. I bought it.
Okay.
I opened it, I tried to eat it, and I was like, yeah, not for me. I ate a little bit. I'm like, no, I'm going to go back to mangoes and strawberries and pineapples. This is not my thing.
So at home, we have this rule right now of I'm only allowed to have one weird new type of vegetable or fruit in the fridge at any given time. because what happens is that every time we go somewhere to a shop, I'm like, oh, what is this? What can you do with it? Let's just buy it and figure it out later. and then we end up with like all sorts of weird stuff that like we don't know what to do, and I'm then of course struggling to figure out and incorporate it in a dish. And like, it's worth it every now and then. But then Fabienne was like, okay, I understand what you're doing there, you can have this game, but let's limit it to one at a time.
That's hilarious. I love it.
And yeah, so right now I have this sort of weird German type of cabbage in the fridge. It's been sitting there for 2 weeks and I still don't know what to do with it. But I can't buy anything else until I make a dish.
Good life. I have one more question that I haven't asked, and I should have asked it. But have you ever felt lost, or have you ever felt stuck, or like your compass is broken? Because you talk about fixing your broken compass, but I never really ask you, have you ever felt lost?
Oh yeah, I think many times. I think mostly this would be related to my professional life. So, just trying to understand what I'm actually doing with my life, right? I mean, for example, okay, I think I went into my undergrad and I didn't feel too lost back then. That felt like a good decision because you're still sort of thinking, oh, everything's in front of you. Like, this is great. I'm enjoying it. Then, I think when I started doing my PhD, so I've decided for the PhD and actually maybe even before that already, like during my master thesis, you sort of ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? Why is this interesting? And like, if things don't work, you're like, oh, it's terrible. And then, yeah, I mean, during the PhD, like you see sort of your friends, work in companies and sort of move somewhere, and you're somehow getting this degree and you don't even know why at times. And like prospects in academia for scientists are not always very good. Like, one of the problems is that there is sort of a very steep pyramid of there's a lot of people who study like, let's say, physics, for example. But the number of people who actually get permanent jobs is like very, very little. And of course, those are only like crazy genius overperforming kind who sacrifice a lot of the other aspects of their life to sort of, make it there, like in terms of like, yeah, I mean, also in terms of like working hard and, not like, yeah, as a scientist, you're not particularly earning very well if you're in academia. So you're sacrificing that aspect. You have to, as long as you don't have your permanent position, you have to move between countries quite a lot, like for a PhD, postdoc, and so on. And like, I got lucky, for example, after my PhD, I did a postdoc in Paris, which first of all is an amazing city, and I was there for a bit more than 3 years, which is actually a bit uncommon because most of the time these positions, they're like for 1 year or maybe 2 years max. And quite often the sort of good academic like groups, they might be in a university in the middle of a cornfield with nothing around for like hours and hours, where like there's no culture, there is no, like, the weather might be terrible, there is no nice nature, like all sorts of places where there might be good science, but that's about it, and that's the only thing you can do. And then, so you're there and like you sort of sacrifice a lot, right, on the financial side, on the personal side. A lot of people, like scientists, sort of, I know, live in different cities to their say spouses or even their kids at times, which is just terrible. I mean, and so and so you're going down that path and you sort of already know that that's what awaits you to some degree. And then, I mean, you sort of end up every now and then feeling a bit lost or, a bit uncertain about the future. And that gives you anxiety, for sure. And so, I've definitely felt that many times.
Makes sense. I remember it. We had a lot of discussions about it. And I can also feel how it feels when you see like Sivo and Razo, who were building at the time like very much their careers getting raises every year, moving the corporate ladder, and you hear about like, oh, I've done this and I've done this and I've done this, and you're like, I'm getting the
Yeah,
same shitty wage.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, as a PhD student, you're basically below poverty line. You really the money you get is not like it's enough to live, but like you can't even save money much. At least most of the places. So yeah. You start comparing yourself to your peers who are sort of like your age, and but somehow you like seemingly light years away from where you are. But then I think the one thing that sort of um, why in the end why I think it was okay, and why I didn't get too desperate, is that I actually really enjoyed doing the job. So that's I think that's the one positive, and maybe the one advantage. Like it might not be financially, but like I wake up in the morning and I'm not terrified going to my work. I'm actually super excited about it, and then you go to work, you start doing something, and then you're like, oh shit, it's already time to go home. Like, I wish I had a couple more hours to like think about this and that problem. And like, I think that's quite like a privileged position to be in, which doesn't happen to everyone, right? At least then, from discussions with the likes of Sivo and Brazo, who, or like, especially Brazo, who was sort of, struggling from, burnout. Yeah, then you understand that, okay, at least this aspect is actually quite good. And then you can actually balance that against maybe the extra money that you're not getting. And yeah, I guess my personal conclusion is that maybe that sort of happiness is worth more than the money, right?
Oh, for sure. You can always make more money if you need to, right?
Well, it's easier said than done, right? But
yeah, but then what do you really need?
that's
Like, of course,
that's the important part. Yes.
I get if you're a family, of course, you need more, and if I'm just alone, that I totally understand it. But I think that like people, I mean, do you really need a crawling castle for your kid?
Well, I didn't
like,
buy it, so I suppose not. No, but you're completely right about this. It's like a slippery slope, right? I mean, no matter what you earn, you always find someone who, like, okay, unless you're, I don't know, somewhere on the billionaires top 100 of Forbes, then you always find someone who, earns like way more than you, and then you start comparing yourself, and yeah, it's not. Yeah, ultimately, that's not a really good measure of how well you're doing, because I mean, okay, you sort of want to, be able to afford, nice food, clothes, live in a place where you want to live, be able to travel and do holidays. But then beyond that, right? I mean, there is this, probably you can quantify and you can put a number on this, like how much you need to be able to do all of it. And then beyond
oh yeah,
that,
there is a study basically done on it. Like a
exactly,
long
yeah,
time
I
ago
know.
in New York, it was 70. At the time, it was 70, 80,000.
Yeah, well, that must have been a long time ago, right? Especially in New York. But yeah, so you can put a number on this. Actually, you could probably do this exercise by yourself, right? And just figure out this number by yourself. I've never done it. Probably I'm terrified of the result. But yeah, yeah. So you figure out that number, and then okay, if you earn that number, you're fine, and you can focus on whatever else is interesting or important to you. And if you don't, then okay, then maybe you need to
Cut
you
off
know
it.
do yeah, that's one option, right? I mean, you can either spend less or earn more. I mean, there's the two options you have. It's pretty simple, like science, come on. But yeah, but then you figure that out. And yeah, if you're anywhere north of that number, then I don't know, maybe it's time to focus on something else. I mean, there are all of these people who actually it's a bit of a trend, right? People who try to retire as soon as they can, so they sort of don't spend too much, try to maximize their profits, like work in jobs which like where they can make a lot of money, and then with, I don't know, 40 something, they can retire, and then they'll like do whatever they actually wanted to do. So that's a bit of a movement, and then personally, I'm not convinced that this is the right way, because it's sort of the idea of, okay, I'm going to sort of suffer now and then later I can enjoy myself, right? But I mean, you're not going to get the time back. Like, I mean, okay, you can go party, when you're 45, but I mean, it's not going to be the same as going, partying or like enjoying yourself or going on holidays when you're 25, right? I mean, those are just, so you're not going to get that back. And I'm not sure I think you should just strike a balance, and, like enjoy yourself, but also be a bit conscious about your future, maybe to some degree, like at all times, right? But not just try to say, okay, I'm gonna get to this number and then I stop, right? I mean, I don't know. That seems like an odd concept to me.
Yeah, for me, it probably wouldn't work either. But on the other hand, I could have saved a lot more money. Thinking back about it, like where I spend money, and I'm like, fuck, I could have had so much more money to travel right now.
Yes.
Well, you know what? That happened. Nothing I can do about it anymore.
Yeah, that money's gone.
Yeah, so it's good to save. But I don't think that for me, it wouldn't also be journey. I understand that some people like it, and that's fine, as long as it works for you. But you always run the risk that, you just die.
Yes, like, that's a good point as well. Yeah, I suppose.
Maybe that's why I have a different opinion about it. Even nowadays, I still think about money. I don't have huge amount of money to go around and travel. I have some money, but they will run out eventually one day, and it's gonna suck. But I've just and this has been a process, and maybe it's still a process. I was like, okay, I have this money. And I have most of it in crypto, which really sucks right now.
Oh God.
Whatever, it's where it is. And it's worse because it used to be 4 times more, and it's 1/4. So you're taking it out. It's a pain. Mentally, it's a pain for you. And I had so much money, and now I don't have it, right? But I was like, fuck it. I'm taking this money out. This is what I need right now, and I'm just doing it. But every now and then I go back and I'm like, it hurts so much, it's consciously back and forth, but I'm more and more convinced this is the right way. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to make some money, one way or other. So, and we will see what happens afterwards. It's far away in my future right now.
You can buy some more fruits and vegetables that you don't know.
Yeah. All right. Anything else that's left to be said?
No, I think we've more or less covered it all.
All right. Then thanks for having you here.
Thanks a lot for having me. It was great.
People can hear the stories, the bigger the impact it's going to be. Thank you for listening. And let me know what you think about this episode, because it was a little bit different and I would like to know what you think about it. Any comments or questions will be welcome, and I'll be happy to answer them. And please, 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 if you enjoy the podcast, don't forget to subscribe and give the podcast rating, because that will help us tremendously. I'm looking